I don't think it's an exaggeration at all to say that at 3:30 inside Ross-Ade Stadium on Saturday is the biggest game Purdue football has played since the Big Ten championship game. And I know we could probably talk about leading up to it. A lot of us probably thought that about the Notre Dame game in 2024. But when you saw how that game turned out, and it didn't take very long, it was pretty clear to see that the difference between Notre Dame and Purdue on that day was pretty drastic. And what ended up happening was that the separation between Purdue and really the rest of the Big Ten was pretty drastic. Thank you for tuning in to the Boiler Banter podcast. I am your host, Dustin Schutte of Purdue Boilermakers on SI. You can catch all of my content at si.com/college/Purdue, or you can follow me on X at Schutte Dustin. Really appreciate you guys joining in here today. Wanted to talk strictly about Saturday's game and whether or not the Boilermakers can, I don't want to say do the unthinkable, because I think that's maybe not giving Purdue enough credit. And before I get too deep into this, let me be quick to apologize that I'm dealing with a cough here. So trying to suppress that and get out all the words without hacking up a lung today. So if I disappear for a few seconds, I probably hit the mute button. We'll call it the quote unquote the cough button. But that's what's going on my end today. So I've put this out there, and I mentioned this in my bold predictions before the season started, that Purdue would beat USC. And then this week I put out my game day guide, and I think I had USC beating Purdue 37-31 in somewhat of a really offensive game. So if you want to call me a hypocrite, if you want to say I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, feel free to do that. I think Purdue has a legitimate shot, though, to beat USC and kind of wake up some people nationally that this is no longer the Ryan Walters program. This is the Barry Odom program. And I know that wins over Ball State and Southern Illinois probably aren't going to turn a lot of heads, right? And so that's why you see, when you look at FanDuel or DraftKings, you see that point spread anywhere from 20.5 to 23.5 in favor of the Trojans. And look, I get it. USC, through the first two games, they beat Missouri State 73-13. They beat Georgia Southern 59-20. That's pretty good offensive production. They have the top passer in Jaden Mayaba through two games. They have the top receiver in Mekhi Lemon through two games. They have the number 4 running back in the Big Ten in Wayman Jordan through the first two games. So what does that tell you? It tells you that they are a really good offensive team. But the level of competition is what I look at going into this. And certainly Purdue has played Ball State and Southern Illinois, so I know that Purdue's competition level hasn't been great either. But USC has kind of been known to do this to teams, especially under Lincoln Riley, where they rack up a lot of points. They look really good offensively. And but when they get to play better competition, they kind of fall short, right? Like we saw this last year, and they played a really good LSU team in their season opener, beat them on a neutral field in Las Vegas. And all of a sudden, we were looking at that game like, oh, maybe USC's the real deal. They could be a legitimate contender in the Big Ten. They turn around, they play 500 football all of last season. So I think it's fair to say that about both of these teams, we don't really know where they are just yet. Right? I think that's fair because of the level of competition. Now, one thing I will say, though, about Purdue, I think you can look at this Purdue team, and I think you can say this team is light years ahead of where it was a year ago. right? Their defense looks better. Their offense looks competent. They were able to throw for 311 yards against Ball State. They were able to run the ball very effectively against Southern Illinois. So I think you feel really confident in the coaching staff's ability and the way this team is kind of gelling together. Okay. So I'm going to give you a few reasons why I think Purdue has a legitimate shot to pull off an upset on Saturday. And maybe we get a field storming from the student section if that happens. At the very least, I think we can all agree that a 3-touchdown spread is a little bit high for this one. And look, maybe I'm going to turn out to be wrong. Maybe USC's offense is too explosive and Purdue's just not quite there yet. I just don't think that's happening. And a few reasons why I believe this. Number one is that there's going to be a lot of familiarity. And I understand that USC is going to have a lot of familiarity with Josh Henson and Purdue too. But Josh Henson worked on Lincoln Riley's staff for the last 3 years. He knows their personnel very well. He even said as much. He said, I know their personnel, and it can be an advantage for us. And so he's going to work pretty closely with Barry Odom, pretty closely with defensive coordinator Mike Shearer. And he knows their tendencies. He knows what Lincoln Riley likes to do, right? So that gives them an advantage in terms of their preparation week. They know what to prepare for. They know what they're going to see on game day. That's an advantage. Barry Odom, all three of their coaches, there's a lot more in college football, right? But head coach Barry Odom and defensive coordinator Mike Shearer were at UNLV when Jaden Mayaba was the quarterback at UNLV. Helped him win 9 games. Henson was at USC last season when Mayaba, took over the starting job late in the year. So this is a group that's very familiar with Mayaba's strengths and his tendencies. I think that helps. Now, obviously, Jaden Mayaba is incredibly talented, very athletic, can make a lot of different throws, and can run the football extremely effectively. And so it's not just about coaching, but when you know his tendencies, when you know what he likes to do, when you know certain situations, if he's going to do one thing or another, that's going to help your team. You can relay that message to your team during this week of preparation. So I think Purdue has a lot of advantages there. I can't help but get that out of my head. Another thing that when you think back to last year, USC was a team that was 1-4 in road games. They were 1-4. That one win was just down the road at UCLA in the Rose Bowl. This is a team that struggled. They went to Washington and lost, but what stood out to me was they go to Minnesota, lose. They go to Michigan, lose. They go to Maryland and lose. Now, you can kind of dismiss the other losses. Washington was a bowl team. Michigan was a solid team. They ended up beating Alabama late in the year, finished 8-5. I think Minnesota finished with an 8-5 record last year, but Maryland was not a good football team. That loss, by all accounts, on the USC side was inexcusable. So that's one that you kind of, yes, Lincoln Riley this week said, we're going to change some things in terms of our travel. We got a bigger plane. I think he said we got a bigger plane. We're going to do some things a little bit differently because of the struggles we had last season. And maybe that makes a difference. But clearly something was off when they made those long trips a season ago when they weren't successful in those games. I think they were all lost by a field goal or less, or at least a touchdown or less, something like that. So they were all very close, but they couldn't make those plays late in the game. So that's something to watch. The other thing that I think can be an advantage in this game, I want people who have watched, I think there were probably some fans who look at that final score from the Southern Illinois game, because I think 31-0 against Ball State, you feel pretty good about that. They threw for 311 yards in that week. They shut out an opponent. That's not easy to do no matter who you're playing in college football. I think, and it was the first game for that team that's got 84 new or 82 new players on it, right? So any sort of win, especially of that in that first week, I think people are going to be happy with, especially if you have a sizable win, especially if you have a shutout win. But I think there are some people that maybe if you weren't locked into the game, or if you just kind of looked at the scoreboard and said, man, we should be winning this game by more. It's an FCS opponent. I would challenge you to maybe go back and watch that game. And yes, without question, Purdue made a lot of mistakes defensively early in that game. Southern Illinois' first drive, 10 plays, 75 yards, touchdown. Their second drive, 3 plays, 75 yards, touchdown. A lot of communication errors, a lot of execution errors on those first 2 drives for Purdue's defense. So can't have that. You can't have a slow start against USC. But what I would say is when you watch how Purdue played offensively in that game, they made it a priority to run the football in that game. They gave Devin Mockabee 32 carries. He rushed for 126 yards, and they were intent on controlling the game clock, making a push on the line of scrimmage, and establishing the run. And I think the reason they did that was because in that game against Ball State, you're just trying to get an offensive rhythm. You're trying to get a flow. You're trying to get guys. So they wanted to be a little bit more, I don't want to say balanced, but they wanted to put the game away. I think last week there was a point of emphasis on, hey, we need to be able to run the football, and we did not establish that in week 1 against Ball State. So when they had a comfortable lead, they were able to run the football in the first half too, but they got a comfortable lead. They wanted to play game control, clock control, and they were able to do that. And so I think what's going to be interesting is you can't run that experiment in week 3 against USC. It's going to fail. They had to get some confidence. They had to show their offensive line, like, hey, this is how we're going to be able to run the football. They had to get Devin Mockabee into a rhythm. Now, I don't think Devin Mockabee is going to run the ball 32 times against USC. I just don't think that's going to happen. So I think this team is maybe a little bit more offensively balanced than people think. It just hasn't come together in one game. They were very pass heavy in week 1, courtesy of some big plays early in that first quarter. They were very run dominant in that second game because I think that's what they want to establish. I would expect we're going to see a mix and match. And I'm not saying that we're going to see Jeff Brom level trickery in this game, but I do think Barry Odom and Josh Henson probably have some things up their sleeve. I think as much as Barry Odom talks about one opponent at a time, the most important game is the next game on the schedule. Doesn't matter. We want to have a faceless, nameless opponent. I do believe that this is a team that they understand. This is the start of Big Ten play. This is their measuring stick. Even though Barry Odom kind of dismissed that idea of a measuring stick game, I think he doesn't want to go out too conservative, right? I think Purdue's going to take some swings in this game. I think they're going to try to hit the deep ball. I think they're going to take some chances. And after the last 2 seasons that you've had to deal with, I think that's a good thing. And if they're not successful, I think if you're a Purdue fan and you leave and they don't end up winning, I think you say, you know what, at least we went out swinging. Because I think that's what's going to happen. I think Purdue's going to take some chances offensively. They might take some risks defensively. Another reason why I think they're going to take some of those risks is because USC, and I want to give a shout out here too, because I've only watched a few drives of USC this season, so I'm not as in depth, but I want to give a shout out to Matt Zimek of Trojans Wire. I kind of asked him, because I had this thought too. I think Purdue's going to be able to maybe throw the football on this team. I think their secondary is, I don't want to say problematic, but it will give you some opportunities. And he basically said, yeah, if there's a weakness on this team, it's the secondary. They can spring leaks. This is a USC defense that has given up 18 plays of 10 or more yards on a pass play this season. That ranks 15th in the Big Ten. They have given up 3 touchdown passes that exceeds 20 yards. There's big playability there. And Purdue, their receivers, Armand Branch, Michael Jackson, Nitro Tuggle, those guys all have big playability. We saw Armand Branch in the first against Ball State. We saw Michael Jackson against Ball State. We saw Nitro Tuggle against Southern Illinois. Everybody I don't want to say everybody, but there are a lot of players at the wide receiver position who are capable of making plays. So if there's a little bit of a leak in that secondary, I think Purdue's going to have chances to take advantage of it. And I think that's why Purdue is going to take some chances. Because, again, Josh Henson is going to know the weaknesses of that defense, or at least he'll have somewhat of an understanding, and they'll be able to attack those weaknesses. The one thing I think I would caution people about is we're going to see just how skilled this Purdue offensive line is, and if they're able to hold up in pass protection against some of the better teams that they're going to face, because USC's defense has been really opportunistic in terms of getting to the backfield and creating chaos. They lead the Big Ten with 9 sacks through 2 games. They are also at the top of the Big Ten with 21 tackles for loss through 2 games. Again, Missouri State, Georgia Southern. So how much do we really know? Not a lot, but those are really good numbers. So Purdue's offensive line is going to have to be ready for that type of attack, because if they're not, and the situation you don't want to be in is you don't want to be living in 3rd and long. You want to try to stay on schedule. Even if it's just 2 to 3 yards on first down, 2 to 3 yards on second down, put yourself in 3rd and manageable or 3rd and short situations. If they get behind the chains or they get off schedule, it's going to be really tough for them. So offensive line is going to have to play well. And I know that kind of goes without saying on a weekly basis. I'll tell you what, I apologize but my dog is shaking his head every 5 seconds. I think it's just to get attention. I think it's just to interrupt me. But the offensive line is going to have to play extremely well and try to keep USC's defensive linemen and their linebackers out of the backfield. That's going to be a pretty big ask. So, there's going to be a lot of different interesting aspects to this game. In addition to everything that's the things happening on the field, you're also going to have the 2000 Rose Bowl team there celebrating the 25th anniversary of that incredible season. This is the first time since 1998 that in the Pigskin Classic that Purdue has played USC. That was obviously Drew Brees' first start as a Boilermaker. And Purdue didn't win that game, but it was kind of a memorable start for him. So that's really cool. Gary Danielson will be in the broadcast booth with Brad Nessler. Obviously, Gary Danielson, a former Purdue quarterback, and he'll be there calling the game for CBS. So that's going to be really cool. But again, I want to emphasize that the Purdue crowds have been really good through the first 2 weeks, and I give the fans a ton of credit because it's coming off a 1-11 season, and you don't know anybody on the roster outside of probably Devin Mockabee, right? Like, he's the most popular guy. Ryan Brown played last year. Outside of those 2 guys, there aren't probably a ton of names that you recognized. And so for Purdue to have 55+ thousand there basically in the first 2 weeks, I think has been really good. And I expect that the crowd is going to be really good again and bring the energy, bring the juice. There's a reason Barry Odom has been praising the Ross-Ade Stadium crowd, the student section. He knows it's going to take a big effort this weekend. So at the end of the day, I think that USC is probably going to win this game, but I wouldn't be surprised if Purdue does pull it off and starts 3-0. I mean, I think they have all the pieces, and I think that they have the determination. I think that they've improved so much, and we don't know what to expect from USC. Let's just put it that way. Like, everybody's expecting them to be dominant offensively and to have big chunk plays and to score a lot of points, but they've done that against 2 lesser opponents. Like Missouri State, not good. Georgia Southern, not good. Right? So can they do it on the road against a Power 4 opponent? If Purdue is able to win this game and start 3-0, they're going to be bowl eligible at the end of the season because they still have Minnesota, they still have Rutgers, they still have Northwestern on the schedule, they'll have Washington, they have Indiana, Illinois. Like, some of those games I just mentioned aren't easy games, but I don't think they're unwinnable games. I think that, you look at Notre Dame on the road, that's going to be tough. Playing Ohio State at home is going to be tough, and then you got to go on the road to play Michigan. I think that's going to be tough. But if you're able to beat USC this weekend, there are a couple games that you look at the schedule and you say, maybe we do have a chance in this one. So it's going to be really interesting. Like I said, I don't think it's an over-exaggeration to say that this is the most important game played for Purdue football since the Big Ten championship game at the end of that 2022 season. So I'm going to leave you with that. That is, those are just a few of my thoughts on Purdue USC. I will get back to you and we'll record another podcast here next week try to get either a post game or an update on basketball recruiting, something else. But I wanted to get out this podcast regarding Saturday's game against Purdue or between Purdue and USC, because it's the Big Ten opener. There's a lot happening. It's going to be a massive game, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Even if Purdue loses and is competitive, I think Purdue fans are going to walk away thinking, you know what, we found our coach. This is a good team. It's going to be a fun team to watch throughout the season, and they'll be able to rally even more behind this team. So again, thank you so much for tuning into the Boiler Banter podcast. My name is Dustin Schutte from Purdue Boilermakers on SI. You can check out my content, si.com/college/Purdue. Thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon.